Mr. Chris Hall.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to
Thank
the
you.
show.
Appreciate it.
Are there certain first principles that you say, hey, you get into scouting at the professional level, whether you're looking at other athletes who are in the NFL or coming from college where it's your focus, are there certain things that somebody said, hey, Chris, the first 30, 90 days you get in, here's what you have to keep in mind, because I guess Bill Parcells had a rule thinking about college quarterbacks that they had to have like 23 wins. So if they played 4 years but were a little bit better than average, fine. You have 3 years, you're at least winning 8 games. You have 2 like stellar years. And that was like
Right.
a rule of thumb for him. And it got me thinking just about, are there other rules of thumb that you've learned over your career that you could share with the group?
I mean, football's kind of a very specific game. So, like, the one thing we do judge every player on is 3 tenets: is their athletic ability, their play speed, and their play strength.
Okay.
And obviously, those things all are different for every position that they play on the field. So, while your nose tackle might not have to run as fast, he needs to be really strong. You want your running backs and your skill guys to have as much of all of that as they can. I think those are the 3 main things. But then in addition to that, we also delve into like who the person is, and that's personal character and football character. Personal character is, who you are away from the game, where you came from, how you got to be you. Football character is broken down into about 5 or 6 different categories that make up what you do around the game, how you prepare for the game, what makes you the love of the game, your drive, how you pick the game up, your mental and learning aptitude, your toughness, your competitiveness, things of that nature. That's how we evaluate everybody on that. And then with each one of those, each position breaks it down into a different level of specifics. We call it player specifics or position specifics, where literally we have 40 different things we grade a given player on within each one of those traits. So there's a lot of different things, but the overlying thing is athletic ability, play speed, play strength, and then the character of the player, who he is and who he is off the field and who he is on the field.
And what does that talent evaluation look like, and how long does it last? What's the process of it?
Man, the process is a long journey to get from a kid who's a prospect to being a draft selection, and sometimes that can last well over a 2-year period of evaluation, depending on how long a guy stays in school and when he first hits the radar. A lot of what we do is cultivate contacts at colleges, and we speak to literally dozens of different people at every school that's involved with that football player at any level. Obviously, from the head coach to the coordinator to the position coach. But we also talk to the strength coach, the trainers, the sports information people, the support staff, academic people, anybody we can talk to that can give us a better picture of who the player is and how he learns and what he does away from the building, not just on the field, but everything about who the guy is. And honestly, that's the hardest part of our job is finding out who the person is. I can teach you guys how to grade a player and put a grade on it, and that's your opinion. My opinion, we have a bunch of scouts. It's all of our opinions on how good they are, but the more you can get to know the person and how they're going to fit into your culture and what you have, wherever you're bringing them to, that's the most important thing. And if you can figure that out, which you can't all the time, but that's a big challenge. And if the more insight you get into that, the better opportunity the player's going to have success.
I feel like the rise of the coach, and now there's a coach for everything. I got a 10-year-old in baseball, and we can get multiple different coaches at that level. I can only imagine for really talented college players looking to go to the NFL, they're getting coached on what I say when I meet a Chris Hall, and when I got a diagram of play and I do this. Are there any things that have been successful for you that say, I imagine you got to get by that. I want to find out if this kid relaxes and I'm not getting the surface level answers or the knee-jerk things that they've been coached on. That feels like what you're talking about. We're talking about personal character.
Right.
Are there things you do that try to scrape by that veneer that they've built up from these professional folks that are trying to help them, maximize their contract?
One of the big things is to try and find out, do they really love football? Mm-hmm. Or do they love what football can bring to them?
Yeah.
And if you can find the guys that love to play the game because they love the game. Those are the ones that typically have a lot more success than the ones that are in it for a paycheck, or that are in it because they happen to be big and they were good at it, but they don't really love playing. And there's so many things like that you try and find out from the peripheral sources. What do they do that makes them love the game? And that's, like I said, that's the hardest thing for us to crack sometimes, is to see if a guy really loves playing football. Because if you don't love playing football, the NFL will eat you up. It is such, I mean, when you break it down, less than 2% of college athletes actually even get an opportunity to go to a training camp or to try out for an NFL football team. Less than 2%. It's probably even smaller than that, realistically. When you think, if you shrink it down to all the levels of colleges that play football. So you're talking about the elite of the elite. And those guys usually have something that those other guys don't. First of all, athletic ability is the main thing. You got to be able to play the game at a high level. But there's also this love of the game that you have to have for it. And I imagine that's the same in whatever your business is. You know, if you love what you're doing, you know, the old cliche, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. But there's a little bit of truth to that, though, too. I mean, you want to go somewhere where you enjoy being. You enjoy being around people that enjoy being and doing whatever it is they're doing. So those are the kind of guys we want to find and build our team with. And the more we learn about who the person is, not the player, but the person, we can figure out if they really fit into that mold that we're trying to build our team with.
Yeah, one of the questions I always ask when we're working with the sales team or operations, I'll say, how many people on your team love to sell? I don't mean taking orders. I mean knocking on doors, dealing with objections. How many of them love that? And it's not uncommon. If you got 20 sales guys, they'll say, I don't know, 3 or 4. So you're like, okay, right? So I think that's probably getting some of that math you're getting to, but yeah.
And I'm sure it's like that in all walks of life too. I mean, there's a lot of jobs out there that aren't very exciting. You know, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've been working for the Dallas Cowboys for 32 years now. I don't know any different. You know, I've seen guys leave our place and go other places, whether it's coaches, scouts, players, and 9 times out of 10, they all come back and say, man, it was good here. It was really good here. I always like to say we're kind of a Fortune 500 mom and pop shop, because it is a family business for the Jones family. And they do care so much about what we do. I mean, sometimes they get beat up in the media a lot, but it's such a caring family environment once you get into it. And that's what we try and build our locker room with too. And the more you can do that with guys that care about each other and want to win and work together, I mean, it's no different than any sales force or any business that you have. When you have a good staff, you're probably going to have success.
You've been there for 32 years. I'm sure you've seen some teams without the greatest culture, but now an organization with a very strong culture. What's your advice in what you've seen with the Cowboys on building that strong culture within the organization?
I think a lot of it is some of the things we've already talked about. It's the love of what you're doing, right? If you don't really love or at least enjoy what you're doing, you're going to have more bad days than good days. And you have to build your team or your staff or whatever it is around people that enjoy doing what they're doing. The best locker rooms that I've seen are guys that click and they take care of each other and they support each other and they're in it together, whether it's a defense or an offense or the whole team. They're all driving towards a common goal. And for you to get to that, you've got to have everybody, I don't want to be cliche guy again, but rowing the boat the same way, or everybody's got to be working towards the same common goal. And when you're not, when you got somebody on an agenda one way or another, it kind of slows things down a little bit. Guys that are more concerned with their stats or how many touchdowns they have or how many tackles they have. At the end of the day, the only thing that should matter at our level, and really probably you got to get wins. And the more wins you get, the further you get to go in sports the more good you do at whatever you're at, you're going to keep building. You're going to build your team. It's going to get better. Your business is going to get better, and everything's going to keep going up for you.
Yeah, I was listening to one of the shows that the Cowboys put out. You came on and were just talking about your day-to-day work. I was fascinated thinking about, for a prospect, you said you're looking to get at least 2 or 3 different sets of eyes on an athlete, right? How do you, in a way that builds camaraderie, respects people's intuition and their skills, when you're saying, I don't think we should touch this guy at all, and I'm saying, this guy is 1 in a million. He's Roger Staubach, at 19. How do you guys handle in a way, that builds support and encourages you guys to continue working together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of the answers in it are the same I'm talking about with building our football team.
Okay.
We have to build our staff the same way. We've got to get a bunch of guys together, and girls now, that understand the direction we're going and the type of team we're trying to build. And we all have to scout the same way. We got guys that have joined our staff from different teams, and they did things different way. And one of the worst things when I was with so-and-so, we used to do this. Well, you're not there anymore. You're here with the Cowboys, and this is how we do it here. And it's okay to bring some different ideas and perspective in, but understand that we've got a way of doing things. And there's a time to introduce different ideas and to try and continue to get better and push forward, but nobody wants to hear about what you did somewhere else because there's a reason you're not there anymore, probably.
Typically,
Again, it's building a staff and making sure everybody's going the same way with things and understanding what we're trying to build. We've got an incredible dynamic in our group right now that my boss, Will McClay, has done an unbelievable job of bringing our coaching staff and our scouting staff together so we understand what we're looking for. There's a lot of teams in the league, and I imagine it's all professional sports, where there's an old adage, scout scouts and coach coaches coach.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's a little scary sometimes, because if the scouts are thinking and looking and bringing guys in that the coaches don't really want or are playing a different style, it's not going to work. So what we've built at our place is a great communication between our coaching staff and our scouting staff, where we understand what Coach McCarthy wants in his players. We understand what kind of defense Dan Quinn's trying to build. We understand what Kellen Moore, how he wants to run an offense. And it, honestly, it hasn't always been that way. It's the more specific you can be about what a person or a player's role is, and the more understanding that person has of their role, the more success you're going to have with that. And that helps us to identify guys that fit those specific roles. You gotta know your role, and then be great at it at the end of the day. So, that's what we're trying to build, is guys that fit into the culture that we have, that are really good at what they do.
How much do analytics come into play when you're evaluating a player? The NFL Combine has been huge in the NFL here, past 10, 15 years. How fast can a guy run? How high can he jump? All of those factors. But how much do you take those analytics and use those when evaluating a player, as opposed to watching the guy play football?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erik. And the underwear Olympics are where many mistakes get made, because you focus in on times and how high I can jump, how fast can he run, and you get away from how do they play football. I think analytics has certainly become a huge part of what we do, and across professional sports. Whether the birth of it was Moneyball in baseball or however it got to where it's at, everybody has an analytics department in every single sport. There's loads and loads of data that are generated, not just from games, from practice every day, from guys' sleep habits. We got sleep number beds in guys' house that are tracking how they sleep. Dak's a great he's out there advertising it. But my point is, there's so many little teeny tiny aspects of data that are now tracked and put together to come help you get the big picture answer on things. And at the end of the day, it's a piece of the puzzle for us. It's become a lot more prevalent, like I said, in the last 5 to 10 years, for sure. I always you brought up the Combine, and the Combine's great for telling you what kind of athlete they are. What's their athletic ability? How fast can they run around the cones? Wherever they were training, did it cheat them how to go around the things? Did they learn all the tricks of a faster start at the 40? The only difference is there's no linebacker there ready to knock their head off when they come around the corner.
Right.
Nobody has to tackle. I've never seen anybody at the combine run in a helmet and pads yet.
Right.
So it's play speed versus time speed. He can jump 42 inches, but how does he jump when a guy's tugging on his jersey and he's got to get away and make a play up above his head? All those things happen on the football field, and the best resume that we have is what happened in the fall for anywhere from 10 to 16 games now, depending on what level you're playing at. And that's where the meat of our ability stuff is focused. There's so many little pieces to the puzzle of what we do to get to those 3 nights in April, where we get to choose the players that we think are going to help our football team get better and better. So analytics has become a bigger piece than it used to be, but it's still a piece of the puzzle. It's not a be-all, end-all part of it.
That's a good segue for my question here. Was, on one hand, there's never been more data, and we see all the Amazon, stat that. And meanwhile, look at 2 of the best quarterbacks you've brought into the organization, Tony Romo, Dak Prescott. As you kind of balance those, Dak was 4th round, and then Tony was undrafted.
Tony was a free
right?
agent. Yeah.
Yep. How do you guys square that up with all the work you do, and then deal with? I imagine there's a certain level of randomness, especially at the quarterback position. How do you guys think about that?
That's the quarterback is the hardest position of any position to get right, or
feel that way as well.
or to predict. Just because a guy has had success at the college level doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a great pro. Yeah. You start off with just the simple measurables, and whether it's hand size or how tall you are.
Right.
You can't discount anybody any day. I mean, Kyler Murray's okay. We'll call him 5'10". But you've got other guys. Drew Brees was just a hair over 6 foot. Baker Mayfield's running around doing some things out there. Yep. There's a lot smaller guys that are playing that position at a high level nowadays.
By the way, you only said the Texas guys, but carry on. That's fine.
I did, didn't I? Sorry about that. But the point is, everybody, the game has changed so much. Used to think the guy was a drop-back pocket passer, the Ben Roethlisbergers of the world, the guy, Troy Aikman, who could stand in the pocket, big, giant, tall, tough guy that could take a hit and make a throw.
Yep.
Well, the game has changed. It's not a game where it kind of bubbles up from the high school level to the college level and now the pros.
Spread offense.
So our game right now is a game of space.
Mm-hmm.
So in a game of space, you have to be athletic and you have to be able to move around and to cover guys, get away from guys, and move. It's a challenge to put all that together and find the right guys that fit all those different parts and pieces.
So you're part of a team that goes out, finds these guys. You're on draft day. What happens in the war room when it comes time to selecting these guys? Any bickering back and forth on who to take and when to take them, that you can let us know?
Yeah, it's a great question, and everybody, it's not Draft Day, the Kevin Costner movie. There's small elements of truth in that you see, but you know what? By the time you get to Draft Day, and I imagine it's the same with every team, you've got a plan in place. The problem is there's 31 other teams that have a plan in place too, and you're looking at the same group of players, right? Yeah. And some teams value guys higher than others. You value guys higher than others. And it's when you get to that point, we spend probably 3 solid weeks out of a very long road to get to those 3 weeks of having our entire staff together, our decision makers, our scouting staff, parts of the coaching staff at the time, putting our draft board together. By the time you put that draft board together, it's a culmination of sometimes as much as 2 years worth of work getting that together. And when you wrap that thing up and you come in there that first day of the draft, you feel good about what you've built up there. And it's a good blueprint. Is it correct all the time? No, of course not. Everybody misses on guys for many different reasons. But you feel good about the names that have ended up there. everybody on the staff generally feels really good about that. You're going to have a coach that doesn't like that guy as much as another guy.
Sure.
You're going to have one scout that likes his guy better than the other guy and wants to see his guy get drafted. But at the end of the day, that's the work that the arguing has gone on before you get to those 3 days when you're making the picks. Now, you have to be both proactive and reactive as the draft goes on, because as you're managing how many guys you like at a certain position, if you see that position, we call it a run, there's a run on linebackers.
Right.
Well, crap, there were only 10 to start with, and now 6 of them are gone. Well, you might start to value those 4 that are left a little bit more than what they actually are. That's where, you get into, they reached for need, or they, you kind of feel like, man, if we don't get one of those guys, now we're dealing with just like rookie free agent guys. And
Okay.
how much are they going to really help? Well, if they're Tony Romo, they help a hell of a lot. Miles Austin, Cole Beasley, all these guys were rookie free agents that slipped through the draft. So, again, the randomness, you don't know sometimes where your dudes are going to come from. If a guy made it to the board, you like him.
Okay.
Whether it's a second rounder or the last guy in the 7th round, somebody had a good enough feeling about him to argue and to discuss to keep him on our draft board. So we should feel good about anybody that we take off our draft board at the end of the day.
Chris, to what degree do you guys track your confidence in current players with the goal of then revisiting them in the future? I.e., hey, we have this draft class. Do you
Right.
ever look back and say, 3 years ago, this is how we felt, and then here's how they performed? Or is there's thousands of variables on someone you wanted to take, but some other team took him, and now he's an all-pro and going into his 3rd year?
Right.
Or is that would that be a waste of time?
No, not at all, because you learn from your past performance,
Okay.
whether it's the mistakes you made, perceived mistakes,
Yeah.
or whether it's the successes you have. If you're successful with something, okay, why did that work?
Yeah.
And in the same way, if something didn't work, why did that fail? And, whether it's taking Taco Charlton instead of TJ Watt, or whether it's why didn't we draft Tony Romo?
Yeah.
You look back at that, okay, what did we miss
Okay.
with Tony? Well, Tony had this savant-like ability to understand the game.
Yeah.
Could we have figured that out when he was a senior at Eastern Illinois? Maybe, maybe not. I don't
Cradle
know.
of quarterbacks. I just
Those-
want to
those
slide
are-
that in. Carry on, Chris.
That's what I
but
hear.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
And I brought up the TJ Watt Taco Charlton deal for a reason too, because at the time we didn't feel like TJ fit the scheme we were playing.
Okay.
In retrospect, that was a horrible mistake, right? I mean, the dude, he can sack the quarterback.
Yeah.
We felt Taco was a better fit. It didn't work out for a bunch of different reasons with Taco. But at the time, we felt like we made a good solid decision.
Yeah.
But if you don't go back and look at both, like I said, both your successes and your failures, you're probably going to make the same kind of blunders over and over again if you don't examine why did something work or why did it not work. And the trick with our deal is we have coaches that come and go. Some of them because they get fired because they didn't do the job good enough, and some of them because they did the job so great they got hired by somebody else in a higher role.
Yeah.
We have scouts that move on to other teams, that get promoted. Guys have different roles and everything. But the constant has to be examining the choices you made and why it worked or why it didn't work. And when you're playing a certain scheme, whether it's offense or defense, and you change that, oh, that's a scout's nightmare, because now we've been looking for guys that fit a 3-4, and all of a sudden
Right.
we got to find guys that fit a 4-3. And the guy that we just took 2 years ago, oh, man, how's he going to fit in what we're doing now?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're a good enough athlete. Back to our very first thing, they got to be a great athlete to play at this level. That's how some of them can transform and mix over into different schemes. Some of them can't. They fit a role.
Yep.
And if you're not using that role, they're not gonna fit into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. This theme of unconscious competence, which I had a client tell me about. They're like, hey man, we just know how to do this really well, but we don't think about it. What you're doing as a consultant is coming in and poking and prodding, trying to figure out how we do what we do well. You can't do that. And I was like, my comment was, I couldn't disagree more. If you don't know why things are working, if they stop working,
We go back every year, and we look at the grades that we gave players 3, 4, 5 years back.
Okay.
And that's one of the things we always send out to our scouts. Hey, here's the guys. Here's what our pro system is grading them at.
Yep.
This is what we think of them as NFL players. Did they fit what you thought they were going to be?
yeah, that's great.
And if you don't look at that and learn from that, okay, I thought this guy was going to achieve this level. Well, he did a lot better. What did I miss?
yeah,
Or was it intangible things that I couldn't see at the time? Or did he happen to get with a winning program that had a coach that believed in him? How was he supported? Yeah, some of those things you just don't know.
Right.
Other times you look at it and go, oh man, yeah, I know why he failed. You know exactly why he failed.
Yeah.
But you may or may not have known that was a variable when you talent risk and where does he fit on your scale. So those are huge challenges for us to figure out. And, you know, we like to think we get it right more often than not, but we miss, you know. Sometimes you make a bad hire or a bad draft pick. And I think the biggest thing is you have to be big enough to understand that, oh, we made an error there, let's fix it now.
How do you rate a draft as successful or a failure? At what point do you do that? We see all these draft grades come out day after the draft. I'm sure you
My
don't.
assumption is you solely look to Mel Kiper, and Mel Kiper determines.
And you know the funny thing about that is
It's a great question.
there's dozens of Mel Kipers now, right? It's become a great industry, guys. And
Yeah.
some of these dudes are really, really, really good at it, and others, I don't know who they are sometimes that throw these things out. Look, I'd be lying to say if we didn't follow what those guys put out. We're aware of it.
Yeah.
Do we go by that? No, of course not.
Yeah.
We spend thousands of hours and investment of our entire staff on, it's our opinion, this is for our team. You know, I look at some of those mock drafts and I would go, that guy's giving him to us in the second round. He's not even on our draft board.
That's gotta be crazy.
And you know what? There might be 10 different reasons why he's not on our draft board, right?
Right.
But in that prognosticator's view, oh, he's a great fit for the Cowboys. At great value there. So it's all that's popped up is, look, it's another opinion. Our business is so much about opinions, but like those guys that are doing that, they don't have all the information. They've got parts and pieces of it, and they've got a source that told them this. But we've got a dozen sources at that school
Sure.
that have told us a dozen different pieces of information. Well, they may have a guy on the coaching staff that they went to college with or whatever. And are they evaluating the tape, or are they listening to what other people are telling them?
Right.
And that's a big part of it, too. I mean, I get a kick out of listening to Mel and Todd argue about whether Kenny Pickett's hand size is going to play in the NFL or not, right? But at the end of the day, we don't know, and it's up to somebody in the NFL to decide, yep, I can make it work with that guy.
Yep.
Might work, might not. We don't know that, but it's fun to kind of track along with that. And you know what? We do track it. We actually, you know, that's a part and a piece of some of the stuff that we put together in our big analytical scope of
Okay.
what is the pundit saying?
Yeah.
What's the value according to them? And you know what? Sometimes, however they've got their information, it works out that way.
Yeah.
Now, the original question was, how do you grade your draft? You go back to that. I hate the day after. I don't know if we had a good draft this year or not.
Right. Nobody does.
There's 32 teams that walk out of there thinking, damn, we just made our football team better, and we got a bunch of dudes that we really like.
Yep.
3 years from now, I'll let you know if that was the case or
Right.
not.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really how, all the way back to Coach Landry, I mean, it was by year 3, you got to know exactly what you've got in a guy. Year 1, they're a rookie. A lot of times their head's spinning. Year 2, they've kind of got a handle on how the thing works. They should be becoming the player they are. And if they ain't got it by year 3, it's time to move on.
I want to ask you a little bit. Maybe this is a nerdy question. I don't know. You'll tell me. I know a big part of what you do is manage the database of the talent
Yep.
you're looking at. I'm interested in how you manage your database within your team and how you guys work together. I think it's a big issue and a big opportunity in our industry. And at the same time, what's the impact of the player transfer portal and the COVID-free year?
Oh, man.
So my guess is your database, because everyone got a free bonus year of school,
Right.
That expanded. I don't know. I guess my question is, any advice for managing in a very intentional way people who have biases and may or may not be good with computers, and how you manage the database to make better decisions?
Yeah, so we've got a pretty sweet database that houses all that information,
Okay.
right? And we've got a couple of programmers that are great at what they do and help us do our job and make it easier for us to do our job. You know, there's always something else I'd like to be able to add to it. Sometimes we can get to that, sometimes we can't get to it. But we typically manage, our database will end up with usually 11 to 1,200 prospect suspects by the time we go through the whole process.
Okay.
The last couple of years, that number's jumped up significantly because of a couple of principles. The transfer portal, kids are able to now flip schools without having to sit out a year. And COVID. Every single college football player got an extra year to play.
Yep.
However they want to use it. They can use it at the school they're at. They can grad transfer to another school. They can transfer up levels. They can transfer down levels. But we got to account for those guys. So in a lot of ways, we're almost dealing with two separate draft classes instead of just one, because when we start off going to schools in August and visiting campuses and watching them do their training camp practices, we don't know if a kid's going to stay in school, if he's going to come out.
Right.
The one thing we do know is a guy has to be 3 years out of high school before he can be considered for the NFL draft. Okay, well, that could be a redshirt sophomore. Well, now, okay, if we're looking at redshirt sophomores, that's a big, not many of that happens.
Yeah.
But now you got juniors that are eligible. If somebody's in their ear and they're deciding they're good enough to take a crack at it, you got a whole junior class. You got your regular seniors who've been there for 4 years. You got your redshirt senior who's been there for 5 years. Now you got a COVID senior who may have been there for 6 years. You got some guys that may have got a waiver from the NCAA that had a medical year because they lost a year because they tore their knee up. That guy could have been there 7 years.
You're Tommy Callahan seniors.
So
Marquette.
you just don't know. So
Yeah.
we kind of had to expand our scope a little bit and broaden things and make sure that we were able to cover all that. And we got a good feel of it last year, and we've kind of shrunk back down into, it's going to be a little more focused this year. It's not quite as wide open as it was in the first year of the unknown COVID senior, so to speak. Now we've got a little better handle on, guys are kind of drawing in, and quite honestly, the schools know their players better now too.
Right.
You know, they know who's got another year. No, that guy's not ready to come. If he comes, he's making a huge mistake. There's so many moving parts as we get out on the road in the fall, but managing that database is huge, and we will probably add between 300 and 400 players that didn't originally show up in what we had by the time we get to the draft in April.
How do you whittle that down? What's your process there? Is it several steps? You have meetings every month to whittle that down until you finally come up with a draft board?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different checkpoints along the way in our process. Obviously, we start off with a big giant list. That starts to expand as we find out, oh, that guy transferred here. We thought he was at this school. So the list grows in August and September,
Okay.
a little bit into October as you're still figuring out, man, they didn't write that guy? Holy cow, he's having a great year. Got to add him to the list. Oh, man, he's really playing well. I think he's draftable. We need to get another scout in here to look at him. So we go through that. So in October, we kind of have our first weigh station. Bring all of our guys in town. Let's run through your area. What have you seen?
How many guys is that, Chris?
We have 12 college scouts total.
Okay. All
In
right.
various different roles. We have the country broken down into 6 areas, and then we overlap in different ways to where, you know, by the time we get to the draft board, we've probably got, anybody that's on our draft board will have a minimum of at least 3 full reports and probably up to 6 or 7 reports written on when you add the coaches in and the different looks that we do. The college bowl games run December through the first week of January.
Right.
After that, we have all the all-star games where we get another chance to go out on the road and see these kids in a little bit of a different environment.
Yeah.
And that's really the first time we actually get to visit with the player.
Okay.
So when we're on campus, it's rare that you get to actually talk and interact with the player. You might get a minute or two here and there. Some schools don't want you to talk to them. Smaller schools, when they see a scout at the school, they love it, man. They will bring the kid in and let you sit there and talk to him for 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
They want that, man. They want to get a guy to the NFL, right? So the more you can learn about him and feel good about him, they're going to try and make that happen for you. You go to a big school, Georgia, Alabama, I use those two because they've been the king of the hill. They might have 20, 25 players now that are prospects in any given year.
Right.
Their backups are better than some of the other teams that you're looking at, you know, or their role players. So you got to factor all that stuff in. I mean, you know, where you might only spend a day at Sam Houston, you might have to spend, you know, 2 days at Texas A&M to get all your work done. Or when you go to Alabama, you walk in there knowing that you're going to talk about 15, 18 guys. And that's hard to get all that done in one day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so the schools that are more accommodating, and quite honestly, the schools that know their players better and that are amicable to give you that information, you feel better about your visit every time you go to one of those. But once we see those all-star games in January, we'll come back in February before we go to the combine, have another set of meetings where we're starting to, this guy fits, this guy doesn't fit. We're starting to get dialed in a little bit more on building that board down to 150 to 200 guys that we feel are really, these are guys we want for the Cowboys that fit what we're trying to do. We go to the combine and some guys will pop up because they had a great underwear Olympics and they're a great athlete. Now we got to go back and verify that against what they did in the fall. Did we miss something? Or is this guy just, man, he's big and fast.
Mike Mamula, you know.
Great example.
Yeah.
Top 10 pick.
Yep.
Never played very well in the NFL, you know, and the highway's littered with guys like that.
Yeah.
Every team's got dozens of them that didn't work out. But as we get to that point, we go to the combine, then we make a little tweaks and adjustments after that. We spend March out on the road at pro days, getting the microcosms of the combine at each space. Some guys pop up from that. We call them workout warriors. Now we got to go back. Damn, this dude had a great workout. How did he play in the fall? Okay, he's not very tough.
Okay.
Off we go. So that drives us all the way up to April, where we get in that room for 3 weeks and we hammer out what ultimately becomes our draft board. So we have certain parameters and specifics that we look for at each position. You know, if a guy, the other kind of the funny term we use is, if he doesn't meet those parameters, he better walk on water. He better be exceptional at whatever his position's demands are for him to do at the next level. And every now and then there's one of those guys that make it through. But in the same breath, one of our old scouts that I started off with 30 years ago, if you start taking an exception, you're going to eventually build a team of exceptions.
Yeah.
And then it's not going to be what you want.
Yeah.
So you have to be disciplined not to fall in love with, you know, it's usually the little guys that are really good. But if you get too many of them, at the end of the day, big, strong, and fast is going to beat
At the end of the day, don't overthink it.
It just
Football,
is.
big, strong, and fast. Generally a good rule.
It's a pretty good rule of thumb to stick with.
All right. Well, hey, man, appreciate your time here. Maybe we'll wrap up here with maybe just a couple like rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Fire it up.
So I had I'm sure any one of these you can go deep on, but just give me the kind of a short answer there. Jamie from Chicago, friend of the show, listener, says he had this question: the Aaron Rodgers situation, which is, I'm here, I have influence, you're making picks without me know. To what degree? I'm not going to ask you about Dak. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to speculate about Aaron. To what degree do the stars have an influence through the scouting, through the coaching, as they think about their future teammates?
That's a great question. And I think, honestly, in this world we live in today, that's probably become more of an influence than ever
Okay.
ever before in the past, in any sport for that matter.
That's interesting.
I think you probably have general managers that are more involved in, hey, what do you think? My star player, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or whoever.
Yeah.
I mean, I promise you, Michael Jordan had something to say about some of the guys that came in and out of the Bulls team over
sure.
all those years, right?
Yep.
You think Tom Brady had any say with what was coming in and out, even though Belichick runs that whole organization? I guarantee you there's stuff that gets bounced off him.
Yep.
Now, you got to have a boatload of clout to get to that position where a GM or an owner wants your opinion on that, right? Now, happy quarterback, happy team, right? Happy point guard, whoever, whatever,
Sure.
however it works out. So
Yeah.
I think there's a real fine line with that. Yeah.
Someone says, hey, what do you do all day? Chris, you say, this is my passion. This is what I love. I've done this for 32 years. He said, well, I know. Played with this guy at Mississippi State. He was legit. Well, hey, it's not just the GM, but it's also the larger organization, the larger
Sure.
team, right?
Pro sports franchises operate on different levels. Sometimes it funnels down to one decision maker.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's multiple decision makers. At the end of the day, you better have a head coach and a general manager or general decision maker, whoever it is, operating on the same page.
Yeah.
And when you don't, you get the Parcells saying, I got to make the meal, but I can't buy the groceries.
Correct.
Right?
Chris, what's the best advice a mentor has given you?
I think it's just don't cheat yourself. Do the work. There's no shortcuts in whatever business you're in, whether it's scouting like I am or whatever it may be. You got to be honest about the work that you do. And then I think when you open your mouth, you better know what you're talking about. I see a lot of statements get made in my business that, you sure about that? Did you really do the work and do the research, and do you really know what you just said? And a lot of that, I think, comes with understanding your environment, understanding your role, knowing your job, what your responsibilities are with it. And I think so much of it is, some of it too is having the confidence you might be the guy out on the limb sometimes. It's like, I'm telling you, there's something in this dude that I really like. And you got to have the confidence to be able to do that while there's three other people saying, I don't get it. But you have to do it in a respectful manner too. Mm-hmm. Because I jokingly said argument versus discussion. If you're an in there, it's hard to sell your point sometimes too. If you're one of the fighters and not one of the chiefs, so it's learning how to work a room. But if you haven't done the work, you're going to get exposed real quick.
All right, maybe it's the last question from Melissa from Flower Mount.
Oh, I know Melissa.
Also, she's my wife, our CFO. We're having a discussion with our 15-year-old about social media and the choices that you make now, seemingly as a freshman in high school, and how this might potentially impact you later on. To what degree is social media and doing the research getting back to, I remember Josh Allen, when he got drafted or pre-draft by Buffalo, there came, I think some tweets that came out during his senior year at Wyoming, senior of high school prior to going to Wyoming. To what degree does that impact your decision, even if you're like, well, it was 4 years ago, but I don't know, he's still 21.
I mean, that's a tricky one, but the rule of thumb is if you don't want your mom to hear it, you better not put it out there, right?
Yes.
Honestly, it's the 14-year-old version of myself is not the 53-year-old version of who I am now, right? And you hope that you learn and you grow. And again, that circles all the way back to the most important part of our deal is trying to figure out who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that goes for anybody hiring anybody. The more you can know who the person is.
Right.
We all make mistakes. Every one of us has something back in our history we're not proud of, that we said, that we did, that we were a part of, whatever it may be. But it doesn't define you. You know, who you are right now should define who you are and how you act and interact and react with people.
It's tough.
And that's a challenge sometimes because in the world we live in, where you know everybody's got a reporter right in their pocket, you know, and you can video whatever you want to, and then that can be shaped however somebody else wants it to come out.
Right.
You know, 30 seconds versus 60 seconds can be a huge difference in what really happened.
Yeah.
I think you just have to be hyper aware of that right now. And I mean, as you know, getting a teenager to understand that can be challenging. I mean, I've got two girls that, you know, they're 20 and 22 now, and fortunately neither one of them were crazy big with it. But now my 20-year-old is a social media director for where she works, and she's fantastic at it. But she understands the power of what it can do.
Yeah.
And how you can use it for good. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who want to use it for bad. Ask Laramie Tunsil. You know, that cost him millions of dollars on draft day because somebody threw a picture out with him in a gas mask and rolling on a big bong hit.
That was during the draft, wasn't it?
During the draft, and everybody freaked, and you know, it cost him 5 or 6 spots at least. There's a lot of that out there that if you dug through, we dig through social media. We're aware of it. You know, honestly, the media and other people, they do such a good job of it now that, you know, you're aware of where the hot spots are. Now, we still dig into everybody that makes our draft board and take a look at, all right, what dumbass thing did he say when he was 15 if he was involved in it, you know?
Well, hey, man, this has been awesome, man. I think these themes, many of them we touched on, even just what you just finished with, just at the end of the day, really knowing who the person is. And I think as we think about growing our team, and Erik, I'm thinking about us, how much time are we spending to truly know someone before we bring them on the team and onboard them? And quite frankly, I can do a better job on that, you know, to help build our team. So I think a lot of these themes are really universal, but getting your perspective has been fascinating. At the risk of turning this into a 7-hour podcast and getting us all in trouble, hey, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate you making time. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate doing this, man. I enjoyed it, definitely. Thank you, guys.
Good.